Hi, friends. I am super excited to read to you the following story, Harriet, You'll Drive Me Wild by Mem Fox and Marla Frazee. I love this story so much because it reminds me of Olive when she was a toddler. Okay, it really reminds me a lot of her now too, because we've spent a lot of time together the last couple of weeks. I want you to think in your head and tell me, what does an author do and what does an illustrator do? You're right. The author writes the stories and the illustrator makes the pictures. While you're listening to me read this story aloud, I want you to think if you make any connections to the story at your house and with your parents. Olive thinks she's a lot like the kid in the story, but I am nothing like the mom. Harriet Harris was a very pesky child. She didn't mean to be, she just was. One morning at breakfast, she knocked over a glass of juice, just like that. Her mother didn't like to yell, and so instead she said, "Harriet, my darling child." "I'm sorry," said Harriet, and she was. At snack time, she dribbled jam all over her jeans, just like that. Her mother didn't like to yell, so instead she said, "Harriet, my darling child. Harriet, you drive me wild." "I'm sorry," said Harriet, and she was. Before lunch, when Harriet was painting a picture, she dripped paint all over the carpet, just like that. Her mother didn't like to yell, so instead she said, "Harriet, my darling child. Harriet, you'll drive me wild. Harriet, sweetheart, what are we to do?" "I'm sorry," said Harriet, and she was. At lunchtime, Harriet slid off her chair and the tablecloth came with her too, just like that. Her mother didn't yell, so instead she said, "Harriet, my darling child. Harriet, you'll drive me wild. Harriet, sweetheart, what are we to do? Harriet Harris, I am talking to you." "I'm sorry," said Harriet, and she was. Later that afternoon, when Harriet was meant to be napping, she ripped open a pillow just like that. Make a prediction. What do you think happens next? All right, time to find out to see if you're right. 1,000 feathers flew all over in every direction. There was a terrible silence. Uh-oh. Then Harriet's mother began to yell, and she yelled, and she yelled, and she yelled. "I'm sorry," Harriet cried. "I'm really, really, really sorry." Her mother took a deep breath. "I know you are," she said, hugging Harriet tight. "I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have yelled, and I wish I hadn't, but sometimes it happens, just like that." "Big mess," said Harriet. "A very big mess," said her mother, and she started to laugh. And they laughed, and they laughed, and they laughed until they picked up every single one of the feathers. I love that story. Now, I know you can make some connections about why that reminds me of Olive, and maybe some of you too. I can't wait to read another story. And in the meantime, ask your parents if you can paint.